So I had just turned 25 a few days earlier than that, and I started a new job that month. And I was at the gym in the new office building when the news came on the TVs. Extremists had blown up a building. At first, no one knew how many were dead, only that it would be far too many. And in that moment, terrorism stopped being something that happened in faraway countries. It was happening right here at home in my country. And the reporter said that the terrorists hated the US government and they had ties to religious extremist groups. Now, did that mean that everyone in their religion or anyone who looked like them was a terrorist too? No, 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 of course not. But you can be forgiven for people thinking that way. And now, years later, I see the mayor of that city that suffered such a terrible loss, follows the same religion as those terrorists. What kind of message does this send? Isn't that a slap in the face to the people who lost friends and family that day? That day, April 19th, 1995, that was the day that Timothy McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Have we learned nothing? Should we mistrust everyone who looks like him or prays like him or votes like him? Do we have a patriotic duty to distrust those people? I don't know. I'm just asking the questions. Hey, I'm Mike Smithgall, and this is today's Mic Drop. Now, you probably assumed I was talking about 9/11. Most people would. The language, the imagery, the emotion, it all points there. And that assumption is the point. When we hear extremist, religion, terrorism, our minds immediately go to a single faith, Islam. We don't picture Timothy McVeigh, a white Christian man who bombed a federal building and killed 168 people, including children. We remember one kind of tragedy vividly, but we treat the other like a historical footnote. In fact, I imagine there are people listening to this or watching this who don't even know who Timothy McVeigh was. They've never even heard of Oklahoma City bombing. It's all completely just a very small footnote in American history. It's been overwhelmed and overshadowed by Islam. And that difference says everything about how we process faith and fear and familiarity. After 9/11, suspicion landed on millions of Muslims who had nothing to do with the attacks. People lost their jobs, they were detained without cause, or they simply stopped being treated as Americans. It was a very tough time. I was a young man, I was 30 something years old, I guess, at the time. The message was clear: we can't tell the good ones from the bad ones. When McVeigh bombed Oklahoma City, no one said we can't tell the good Christians from the bad ones. No one proposed background checks for Bible study groups or surveillance for militia minded churches. We called McVeigh an extremist, but we didn't call Christianity an extremist religion. That's asymmetry. When violence comes from someone familiar, we isolate the blame. When it comes from someone unfamiliar, we expand it to an entire population. Now, 25 years after 9/11, New York City has elected its first Muslim mayor, Zoran Mamdani. I'll be honest, I don't live in New York City and I don't follow their politics closely. From what I've seen over the last few months, he seems to have come out of nowhere. But there's no doubt he is now one of the most recognized politicians in the country. And right after his win, social media lit up. And one meme in particular caught my eye. It was shared by former Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And the image showed the Twin Towers falling with the statement, "New York, you forgot." And the message was clear. Because Mamdani is Muslim, his election is somehow dishonors the memory of 9/11. That meme and the people spreading it are why I'm talking about this today. Because that response says less about the new mayor and more about how selective our national memory has become. As I mentioned earlier, I don't really know that much about Zoran Mamdani than a few headlines. I'm neither a fan nor a detractor. I'm indifferent to his intentions as a New York mayor. If you have a non religious reason to disagree with him, something about his policies or his leadership, that's fair. It's in fact what you should do. But if your dislike or even your hatred is mostly about his religion, that deserves some reflection. We've learned to equate Muslim with terrorist, while giving a pass to extremists who look more like the majority, more like me, more like us. That's not justice, that's prejudice with a patriotic branding. And this is how comfort shapes judgment. When the dominant religion commits violence, we call it a tragedy. When a minority religion does it, we call it a threat. The majority faith gets invisibility. The minority faith gets suspicion. The majority's extremists are lone wolves. The minorities are cells. The language shifts, but the bias stays. Media and politicians know this all too well. They sell fear because fear motivates, and identity is an easy handle to grab. But intolerance is not strength. It's insecurity dressed up like patriotism. I should be clear about something. As an atheist, I'm not on either side of this Muslim-Christian debate. I disagree with both religions. Those two faiths are closer to one another than either is to me. Both have warm, good-hearted people, people that just want to live their lives and raise their kids and do right by one another. Both have extremists who twist their holy books to justify violence, oppression, and intolerance. If left unchecked, both would gladly turn the government into a theocracy with their version of religion at the center. I've made many videos about the blatant push for Christian nationalism. When Christians shake their fist and scream Sharia law, they're not afraid of theocracy. They just want to be sure it's their religion that gets there first instead of the Muslims. Christians and Muslims are two sides of the same coin. I'm a different coin altogether. And before anyone calls me naive, I know the data. In today's world, Muslim extremists are responsible for more acts of religiously motivated violence. That's true. Nobody is questioning that, certainly not me. But this isn't a scoreboard. Christians don't get to rest easy because their history includes crusades, inquisitions, witch hunts, U.S. slavery, and church-backed segregation. Every religion that fuses itself with political power ends up producing extremists who try to legislate belief. That's why the founders of this country tried to separate church and state. It's why people like me try to push for that and stand up for that. When the government becomes an instrument of faith, it stops being government. It becomes enforcement. So if you want to test for leadership, make it civic, not sacred. Judge officials by competency, honesty, and fairness, not by their prayers. If hearing my opening made you think Muslim, that's proof that the bias still exists. And we don't mean for it to, but it does. We've been trained for decades to react to certain words, certain faces, certain prayers. And that's why memes like Giuliani's spread so easily. They don't rely on reason, they rely on reflex. Fear is always faster than thought. Now, I know this episode will bring pushback. Every time I talk about religion and intolerance, the extremists crawl out of the comments. I'll get called names, I'll be accused of siding with terrorists or attacking faith. That's what happens when people can't separate ideas from identity. Now, you'll forgive me if I don't engage every one of those extremists who shows up to shout. But if you want an honest discussion, even if we disagree, I'm up for that, because that's how adults talk, and that's how we move forward. So, what does moving forward actually require? It requires seeing the world clearly. It means understanding that when fear decides who we should hate, truth and reason don't stand a chance. Terror has no religion. Fear only thinks it does. All right, I'm Mike Smithgall. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. Hey, I really hope you enjoyed today's show. Before you go, make sure you like and subscribe to the show and tell a friend. It really helps us grow. If you'd like more great content from us, be sure to check us out right here on YouTube. You can also find us wherever you get your podcasts, and check out our blog at atheistville.com. Until we talk again, remember, reason and compassion go a very long way.